The year 1912 was about to witness one of the greatest engineering disasters in human history. The ship named Titanic, known as the largest and most luxurious passenger ship of its time, was preparing for a journey that would not only captivate those on board but also leave an entire world awe with its grandeur and resilience. The builders of the ship had so much confidence in its durability that they famously declared, "Not even God can sink this ship," openly expressing their excessive faith in the vessel. However, on April 14, 1912, as Titanic passengers hoped to spend the night sailing over calm and clear waters, enjoying the journey and believing that everything would be perfect, they could never have predicted that a terrifying collision, one that would claim thousands of lives, was imminent. During its voyage, Titanic was carrying a cursed Egyptian mummy. This mummy, discovered years earlier in Egypt, was an ancient relic that was said to bring chaos and disaster wherever it was taken. Yes, we know that the primary cause of Titanic's sinking was a collision with an iceberg. However, could the secret hidden behind this dreadful catastrophe, the still unsolved mysteries and unexplained events, be connected to an enigmatic practice linked to the ancient techniques of Egypt? Today, by uncovering chilling theories beyond what is commonly known about Titanic's sinking, we will attempt to solve the mysteries surrounding one of history's greatest maritime disasters. Watch the video carefully, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. If you are ready, let's begin. In March of 1909, plans were made for Titanic to be designed as the largest and most prestigious passenger ship in the world. This colossal vessel was to be constructed by a workforce of 11,300 people, including the most skilled engineering and laborers of the time. The person who would provide the necessary funding for the ship was the American investor John Pierpont Morgan. Morgan invested approximately $7.5 million in the construction of Titanic. The ship was to be built at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Northern Ireland as a transatlantic liner owned by the White Star Line Company. At the same time, it was expected to compete with the transatlantic ship Lusitania, owned by the Cunard Line Company, which was also engaged in passenger transportation. The ship's grandeur, size and safety were meant to symbolize the pinnacle of technological advancement of that era. At the forefront of Titanic's design was engineer Thomas Andrews. He meticulously planned every detail of the ship, ensuring that it was not only massive in scale but also remarkable for its comfort, using the most modern technologies of the time. Extensive planning was carried out regarding various sections of the ship. One of these features was Titanic's 4 smokestacks. Their design was so massive that they were intended to be the most recognizable symbols of the ship. However, in reality, only 3 of them were functional, while the 4th was purely decorative, added to enhance the ship's majestic appearance. Titanic's construction was planned to be complete within 2 years. However, during this period, thousands of workers labored day and night to assemble that massive vessel. While building the ship, significant distinctions were made in its design, particularly in terms of social class. On the upper deck, luxurious rooms, restaurants, swimming pools, and entertainment venues were designed exclusively for wealthy and affluent passengers, while on the lower levels, a simpler living space with limited amenities was created for the ship's lower-class passenger. The ship was planned to weigh a total of 50,000 tons and measure 269 meters in length. At the same time, with its superior comfort, elegance, and prestige, it became a major symbol of that era. Titanic was one of the first ships to use the largest steam engines of its time. The ship's internal power systems were equipped with technology so advanced that it was considered nearly unsinkable. These 4-cylinder engines, producing 59,000 horsepower, were built with remarkable engineering, allowing the ship to travel at a speed of 43 km per hour. This made Titanic one of the fastest and most powerful transatlantic ships of its time, significantly increasing its prestige in the tourism industry. When the ship was launched on May 31, 1911, construction continued for nearly another year while it remained in the water. After this process, the ship was finally completed on April 2, 1912, and made ready for its journey. By April 10, 1912, Titanic was fully prepared for its maiden voyage. At that time, boarding such a ship was a great symbol of prestige, and not only the wealthy but also famous figures from the various social classes were eager to board. After the entire crew was on board, passengers began to embark at 9:30 a.m. The ship set sail from Southampton, England, heading toward New York, USA, carrying a total of 2,224 passenger and crew members. The captain of the ship was Edward John Smith. Before heading directly to New York, Titanic was scheduled to make a stop at the French port of Cherbourg via the English Channel to pick up passengers from the mainland Europe and to proceed to Queenstown in Ireland. As Titanic departed from its dock, it received a warning about large iceberg along its southern route. However, instead of being delivered to the ship's command center, the message was mistakenly sent to the ship's navigation department. Since such warnings were considered normal for that time of year, they were not taken seriously and were never forwarded to the command center. After the final stop, Titanic finally set out to continue its voyage towards New York. The atmosphere surrounding Titanic was perfect. Nothing could have hinted at the disaster that awaited the massive ship in the coming hours. In the evening, as the sea remained calm as a sheet, passengers moved about the ship in peaceful comfort. There were no waves, and for all those aboard the magnificent vessel, the stillness of the sea seemed reassuring. At 9:30 p.m., the ship Mesaba sent another message to Titanic, reporting that they had encountered a large and expensive iceberg along their route. However, although this report was received by Titanic's radio operators Jack Phillips and Harold Breach, it was once again not forwarded to the command center. More precisely, the two radio operators assumed that the same message had already been relayed to the command station, so they did not pay much attention to it. The radio frequency code used for communication had been entered incorrectly. The warnings, which should have been sent to the ship's command bridge, were instead mistakenly received only by the radio operators. Despite all these warnings, no one believed that an adjustment to the route was necessary. There were 3 lookouts on the Titanic to watch the sea. These lookouts rotated in 2-hour shifts, carefully absorbing the open sea from the ship's observation deck. However, that night, in an unusual occurrence unlike any previous night, no one could see the moon. In fact, a report was sent to the radio room stating that the moon was not visible and that, due to this, the journey should be halted immediately. However, at that point, turning back was not considered the right decision, as it would damage the reputation and reliability of the voyage, which had already sold millions of dollars worth of tickets. As a result, the warnings were never acted upon. Some of the passengers who looked out at the sea from the deck realized that they were moving forward into a vast and endless darkness, while those who had never experienced such a journey before believed that everything was proceeding as expected. The crew, sensing something strange about the water conditions, continued their voyage with fear and unease. As the hours passed, the magnificent ship continues its course across the Atlantic Ocean. The activity inside the vessel reflected the upper class's enjoyment of the journey. While the wealthy passengers spent the night indulging in luxury restaurants and entertainment, third-class passengers on the lower deck spent the night sleeping. Captain Edward Smith was aware that he was embarking on a tense journey. As the ship progressed along its course, the crew carried out their duties with great diligence. By around 10:30 p.m., in the darkness of the night, deep in the North Atlantic, passengers grew more confident that this voyage was safe with each passing kilometer. At 11:39 p.m., Titanic reached the water south of Newfoundland Grand Banks. Lookout Frederick Fleet spotted a large iceberg ahead, though it was difficult to make out clearly in the dim light. Acting immediately, Fleet used the ship communications system to alert the bridge. 6th Officer James Paul Moody answered the phone. Fleet, sounding frantic, urgently asked if anyone was there. Moody responded calmly, asking what he had seen. Fleet replied clearly, "Iceberg right ahead, we are very close." Moody, without immediately informing First Officer William McMaster Murdoch, who was in charge of the bridge at the time, simply responded with a composed "thank you" before hanging up the phone. Those were their last words. Just 37 seconds later, Titanic unexpectedly collided with the iceberg. The impact caused a fatal rupture on the starboard side of the ship, deforming multiple points along the keel. The rivets on the lower decks, unable to withstand the immense pressure, began popping out, and the supposedly watertight compartments started filling with water one by one. The freezing waters of the Atlantic seemed to be rising to engulf the ship as quickly as possible. Due to the force of the collision, the first 5 compartments at the front of the ship, designed to keep Titanic afloat, were quickly overtaken by deep water. The flood spread rapidly along the hull, reaching vital areas, including the boiler room. Activity aboard the ship escalated rapidly. Captain Smith was suddenly called to the bridge after the collision and tried to assess the situation. Observing the rapidly rising water levels, Engineer Thomas Andrews and the ship's officer contacted inspection and finally delivered the grim news to all passengers. Titanic is sinking and there's nothing we can do. Everyone must prepare themselves. At the moment, the passengers recalled the confidence they had felt when purchasing tickets for a ship advertised as unsinkable even by God. Now they were witnessing the terrifying demise of the massive transatlantic liner beneath their feet. passengers in the third-class sections began to realize that water was flooding into their cabins at an alarming rate. Those in the lower decks belonging to the ship's poorest passengers had felt the impact of the collision as a violent jolt, whereas the Voltaire passengers on the upper decks had only perceived it as a mild tremor and initial dismissed it as insignificant. Following Captain Smith's orders at 12:05 am, preparation to lower the lifeboats began. 5 minutes later, the lifeboats were detached from their places, and women and children were given priority in boarding. However, the number of lifeboats on the Titanic was far too few to save even half of the passenger. Despite carrying 2,224 people, the total capacity of the lifeboats was only 1,178. Third-class passengers on the lower decks desperately struggled through narrow corridors to reach the lifeboats, but many were left behind, unable to make it to the upper decks in time. As the water levels rose rapidly, the barriers and locked doors that confined them became their graves. Most of those left behind faced a terrifying choice. Some chose to stay inside the sinking ship until the very last moments, while others, risking the shock, decided to jump into the freezing waters. However, survival in the icy, glacial waters of the North Atlantic was almost impossible. As the supposedly unsinkable Titanic disappeared into the depth of the ocean, hundreds of people perished within minutes, freezing to death in a horrific fate. The curse of the Egyptian mummy theory, while the Titanic disaster remained one of the greatest maritime tragedies in history. The conspiracy theories that emerged afterward shared the catastrophe in mystery. The most chilling of these theories was that the mummy was being carried on the Titanic. Another widely debated theory suggested that his very mummy had previously caused distress among museum staff, turning their lives into a nightmare. Some sources claim that after an initial discovery, museum employees began feeling mysteriously ill, suffering from mental breakdowns, and experiencing strange accidents at work. Several museum workers even reported hearing eerie sounds during night shifts and encountering misfortunes. According to these theories, the mummy was from a sacred period of ancient Egypt and carried a curse that affected everyone around it. Some archaeologists at the time speculated the warlock was a technique used by wealthy dynastic families to protect their possessions from being looted after death. The inscription and symbol on the sarcophagi were believed to be ritual meant to safeguard the deceased with supernatural forces. Of course, while many believed in these legends, others dismissed them as mere superstition. During my research into the authenticity of the mummy mentions in the Titanic disaster, I came across an article on Wikipedia. The article referred to the Titanic-related mummy as the unlucky mummy and stated that it was only displayed at the British Museum in England. However, it also clarified that this was not actually a mummy, but rather the wooden coffin lid of a woman from the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt. Upon checking the official website of the British Museum, I found that the existence of this coffin lid was confirmed. However, aside from a few explanations regarding its alleged curse, the site also stated that the story about the mummy being transported on the Titanic was false. Clicking on the reference links in Wikipedia's Titanic article, I discovered that two links were no longer accessible. Both belonged to the same website, and it was clear that the site owner had shut down their publications and put their domain up for sale. This led me to search for these links on the web archive, hoping to find the older versions of the missing content. Upon doing so, I managed to retrieve the lost articles. 2007. These reference articles had been written in 2007 but were taken down years later. In one of them, it was stated that an English writer named Robinson, who worked for Daily Express newspaper in 1904, had conducted research on the history of mummies. Skeptical of claims about their supernatural powers, he sent his photographer to the museum and published an article debunking the alleged mystical properties of the mummy catalogued as EA22542. However, exactly 3 years later, on January 21, 1907, Robinson mysteriously died at the age of 36 under unexplained circumstances. One of the documents on the British Museum's website was a disclaimer written by the Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Bach, who worked at the museum between 1894 and 1924. The events recorded in this disclaimer are as follows. Between 1860 and 1870, 4 British travelers purchased the mummy's coffin lid during a trip to Egypt. Shortly after, one of these men lost the use of his arm due to an unidentified armed attack, while another was killed in a separate shooting. The third and fourth travelers died in poverty soon after. The mummy lid then passed to the sister of one of the deceased travelers, but as soon as it entered her home, a series of misfortunes began to occur. The famous spiritualist Madame Helena Blavatsky visited the house and claimed to have felt a sinister energy. She warned the owner to get rid of the artifact, leading to its donation to the British Museum. The man who transported the coffin led to the museum died within a week, and one of the workers involved in the transportation suffered a serious accident. These events were attributed to the vengeful spirit of the priestess associated within the artifact. Although records from the British Museum acknowledge the curse rumors surrounding this artifact, no concrete evidence has ever been found to confirm them. However, my further search on the web archive revealed an even more intriguing discovery. I managed to find a 25-year-old article published by the British Museum in 1999, an article that was removed just 1 year later. Compared to the modern articles, this older version contained far more details. While the current museum webpage denies the claim that the mummy was transported on the Titanic, the 1999 article detailed the entire story. According to these old documents, by 1908-1909, the coffin lid had become notoriously linked to unexplained accidents. Museum security guards were terrified of approaching it at night, claiming it made strange noises. Some even demanded its removal from the exhibit. Eventually, the artifact was moved to the museum's basement and a replica was placed in its display case. This deception continued until an American visitor recognized the fake coffin lid and threatened the museum. Seeking to avoid scandal, British Museum officials secretly sold the original artifact to an American collector. The original coffin lid was then shipped to America on the Titanic in 1912. According to the legends, its presence on board brought the ship to its doom, causing it to collide with an iceberg. However, the artifact itself survived the disaster, as its wealthy owner allegedly bribed officials to ensure its safe arrival in America. Because the British Museum was named in British inquiry into the Titanic, the museum's official stance remains that the coffin lid never left its premises, but if the original artifact had secretly been sold, the museum would never publicly admit it. Doing so would not only damage its reputation but also potentially lead to criminal investigations. If this was all just a conspiracy theory, why was the 1999 article mysteriously removed from the museum's records? When I tried to access the past source of another connection on the same website called BFR Online, which was removed in my research, I encountered an extraordinary image. This photo you saw on the screen was an image of Atlanta newspaper in 1909. In the newspaper's latest news, he wrote that this mummy we talk about died many years ago, but still continued to kill and torment. The following was written in the newspaper. A mummy in the British Museum, which Fletcher Robinson told in a newspaper in London, and his so-called deadly forces were more unusual than this strange story. But the reality of the story is Sir Arthur. In addition to being a close friend of Conan Doyle, he was also confirmed by the author, a very respected journalist, and he sent through documents that allegedly provide indisputable evidence that it was far from a simple fabrication. In the continuation of the articles, it is said that when the negative of the mummy photo is taken, the face takes a happy shape. As we have just explained, the ominous story of the mummy is also included here. In this newspaper, which was written 3 years before the Titanic disaster, it was clearly understood that the mummy really caused such negative events. Just last year, Hartwig Fisher, the director of the British Museum, resigned amid revelation that over 2,000 artifacts had been stolen from the museum. These thefts had not occurred all at once, but had taken place gradually over many years. While official records classified these artifacts as stolen, were they actually stolen or secretly sold? Some discussion forums suggest that the British Museum has been discreetly selling original artifacts for years, replacing them with replicas. Officially, the cursed mummy lid was never removed from the museum. It remained there from the time of its arrival until the Titanic disaster. However, the museum director's resignation and the recent scandal surrounding missing artifacts strengthened the possibility that the original coffin lid was secretly sold. The British Museum's silence regarding its missing pieces, the allegations of cover-ups, and most importantly, the possibility that the cursed artifact's original version was sold in secret all suggest that the greatest secrets in history are only the tip of the iceberg. Did a mummy literally exist on the Titanic that night? Perhaps we will never know for sure. The belief that not even God could sink the ship was an arrogance that ultimately led to the death of its passengers. In our next video, we will continue diving deeper into the mysteries of history and humanity. I am Ahmet. See you next time.